Facing a losing battle. Psalm 20. Divine prayer protects against defeat. Your breakthrough here. Are you tired of fighting battles you feel destined to lose? Maybe you're putting in all your effort, yet every breakthrough seems just out of reach. You're left asking, where is God in all of this? Why am I fighting alone? Today, I want to share with you a truth that could transform how you see the struggles you're facing. There's a prayer hidden in Scripture that wasn't written for those who have it all figured out. It's a prayer for the weary, the broken, the defeated. I'm speaking of Psalm 20. This timeless psalm was a call to arms, not for warriors, but for the spirit, for those who turn to God when the odds seem impossible to overcome. Right now, it might feel like your prayers are falling on deaf ears, that every effort is met with more resistance than progress. But Psalm 20 reminds us that the battles we face are never ours to win alone. It teaches us who we should really trust when the weight becomes unbearable, when life feels like it's closing in, and when we're convinced there's no way out. In just a moment, you'll see why this ancient text, the prayer of King David, is more than biblical poetry. It's divine strategy, a guide to surrender control so God Himself steps in and fights for you. But it's not just about hope. It's about learning how to activate this divine promise in your life. Come with me as we uncover what this psalm truly means for you today. By the end of this journey, you'll not only understand how to overcome feelings of defeat, but also recognize how your greatest battles can lead to your greatest victories. The hidden story behind Psalm 20. Psalm 20 takes us back to one of the most vulnerable places a person can be, the uncertain moment before battle. It is a psalm written with clarity of purpose, offering a window into the heart of one who fully depends on God in the face of overwhelming odds. Understanding the backdrop of its writing is essential because it reveals why these words are more than just a poetic prayer. They are a call to surrender, a battle strategy for the soul, and a reminder of where our true strength lies. At its core, this psalm is a communal cry for divine intervention. King David, a man after God's own heart, understood victory better than most. It wasn't just about military strategy, overwhelming numbers, or sheer force of will. He knew that victory came from dependence on the living God, a truth that had carried him all his life. From his humble beginnings as a shepherd to standing triumphant against Goliath, David's life was a testament to this one idea. The battles we face are not ours to fight alone. Psalm 20 was likely composed before a significant conflict, as Israel prepared to send its armies to the battlefield. It functioned both as a personal prayer and a shared declaration. David expressed the collective hope of his people, turning their attention to the one who truly held their outcomes. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. These opening words set the tone, not mere wishful thinking, but an expectation rooted in faith. Imagine standing on the edge of a battlefield, the horizon lined with uncertainty. Fear hovers all around, and yet in this prayer there is calm reassurance. It centers the heart, reminding all who hear it that victory is determined not by human effort but by divine will. This wasn't just a prayer for safety, it was a declaration of trust that defied doubt. When the world reminds you of its uncertainties, of outcomes you can't control, these words point you upward. In verse 2, David prays that God would send help from his sanctuary. This image carries incredible significance. It shifts the source of strength from earthly preparation like sharpened swords and well-trained soldiers to the heavenly realm, where God's presence dwells. It's a picture of intervention, not from man, but from the Creator himself. The powerful contrast in Psalm 20 lies in the verse, "Some trust in chariots, and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." In David's time, chariots and horses symbolized absolute power. The armies with the most advanced equipment, the fastest weapons, and the deepest pockets were considered unbeatable. And yet, here David declares that those tools of warfare, no matter how impressive, are ultimately fleeting. Victory does not come from things that fade, but from the eternal power of God. This was not a statement of idealism, but one of deep, lived conviction. For David, who had once defeated a giant armed with nothing but a sling and trust in God, these weren't abstract words. This psalm contains the wisdom of someone who knew what it meant to go into impossible situations and witness God step in. But the message of Psalm 20 didn't remain confined to physical warfare. It speaks directly to our modern-day struggles, which often feel just as insurmountable as ancient battles. Today, our chariots and horses aren't symbols of war, but of dependence on the things of this world. These could be material resources, personal strength, or even the pursuit of control over circumstances. The harder we hold on to these things, the more we feel the crushing weight of failure when they fall short. David's message is clear. When you trust in what the world offers, you are setting yourself up for defeat. Trusting in God doesn't mean abandoning effort or action, but surrendering the anxiety of control. It's about saying, I will do what I can, but my hope and my faith are in the Lord. Psalm 20 turns our attention away from what we think we lack and realigns it with what we have in God. It reminds us that our battles are not simply challenges to overcome, they are opportunities to witness the faithfulness of God in action. It's a striking moment of surrender, not as weakness, but as strength. This is the hidden story of the psalm, a transition from fear to faith, from reliance on self to complete trust in the one who never fails. The hidden story behind Psalm 20 isn't just David's story, and it isn't bound by history. It's a call for us today, a reminder that whether the battle is external or internal, the solution is the same. Turn your eyes toward the one who knows your struggle and fights for your victory. David's words continue to echo for every heart that listens. They invite us to join that communal cry of faith, to stop relying on what's visible and anchor ourselves in the unseen power of God. This psalm is not simply a prayer. It's a declaration that when everything else falls short, God remains, ready to send His help and bring the breakthrough you've been waiting for. The emotional struggles of a losing battle. There's nothing quite as crushing as the feeling of fighting a battle you know you're losing. It starts as a gnawing uncertainty, creeping in with every failed attempt, every missed opportunity, every unanswered prayer. At first, you may try to muster strength, push harder, and tell yourself to keep believing. But as the setbacks pile up, the weight grows heavier, and soon, any trace of hope feels distant, maybe even foolish. The emotional struggle of feeling defeated is deeply raw and profoundly human, but it's also here, in this space of vulnerability, where Psalm 20 speaks most powerfully. Defeat affects us far beyond the practical or physical consequences. It seeps into the mind, filling us with doubt, fear, and the overwhelming sense that everything we've invested ourselves in is slipping through our fingers. Maybe you felt this when striving to save a relationship that only seems to grow colder. Maybe it's the job you've been working toward, only to be rejected or overlooked time and time again. Or perhaps it's those internal battles, the constant wrestling with anxiety, insecurity, or a deep sense of inadequacy that whispers, "You're not enough, and you never will be." These struggles aren't just a part of life, they can feel like they define life itself. In these moments of despair, the mind becomes its own battlefield. The what-ifs and why-mas begin to dominate every thought. You question where you went wrong, why things didn't turn out differently, and why others seem to be succeeding where you're falling short. Worse, you might start wondering if God hears you at all. Doubts creep in. What if I've been relying on false hope? What if I'm praying to a God who isn't listening? This mental and emotional spiral can feel endless, draining your energy and leaving you spiritually paralyzed. This is precisely why Psalm 20 is so powerful. It doesn't deny the reality of those struggles. In fact, it was written for the very people standing on the edge of what seemed like an impossible fight. It begins with a recognition of human frailty. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble, David prays. He doesn't ignore the fact that we will face troubling times. He acknowledges the reality of our need on not just our physical or material need, but the longing for reassurance that we're not alone, that our cries are heard. Emotional struggles during a losing battle are often tied to one core issue: the loss of control. When you've done all you can, prayed, worked, sacrificed, and it still seems to fall apart, you reach a breaking point. This is where Psalm 20 offers not just comfort, but release. It doesn't tell you to try harder or figure things out on your own. Instead, it reminds you that your help comes from somewhere greater. May He send you help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. This simple truth shifts the perspective from self-reliance to divine reliance. It asks you to relinquish the burden of control and place it in God's hands. But letting go is easier said than done. Our instinct in moments of despair is often the opposite: to hold on tighter, to try to fix things ourselves, to lean into anything that provides even a temporary sense of security. For many of us, these are the chariots and horses of our modern-day battles, our fallback plans, whether it's relying on money, connections, or sheer willpower. But these, as David knew, are flawed sources of strength. The emotional toll of defeat is amplified when our foundation rests on things that can crumble. David's declaration, "We trust in the name of the Lord," isn't just a spiritual affirmation, it's a survival strategy. Trusting God allows us to let go of this crushing need to control every outcome. The emotional struggle of a losing battle also teaches something profound. Every setback challenges what we truly believe in. Do we really believe in God's promises, or are we just hoping for an easy path? Faith is not just tested in these moments, it's refined. It's one thing to trust God when things are going well, when prayers are being answered and blessings feel abundant. But what about in the silence? What about when the praise songs don't stir your confidence, or when you haven't felt God's presence in months? That's where the emotional weight of a battle becomes an invitation to dig deeper, to say, "God, I don't understand this, but I'm trusting you anyway." Psalm 20 provides words of strength for those very moments when you can't generate it on your own. It doesn't promise immediate relief or a detailed explanation for your suffering. Instead, it offers a choice. Will you let the weight of defeat define you? Or will you place your burden on the one who promises to carry it? As much as we long for instant answers, God doesn't always eliminate our battles. Sometimes He equips us to endure them, not by numbing the pain, but by giving us the strength to stand firm amid the chaos. The emotional struggles you face are not signs of failure, they are invitations. They invite you to deepen your trust, surrender, control, and anchor your heart in the truth of who God is. Psalm 20 doesn't just remind you to pray. It reminds you that you're being fought for. Even when you feel like you're losing, the battle belongs to Him. And that one truth, if you allow it to settle in your heart, can shift everything. Unpacking Psalm 20, a verse-by-verse breakdown. Psalm 20 is a profound composition, intricately woven to carry both comfort and power. It's not just a prayer, it's a declaration of trust and victory, meant to anchor wavering hearts and soothe troubled minds. Each verse is like a stepping stone, leading us deeper into a space of abandon and dependence on God. To truly understand its richness, we need to unpack it, verse by verse, and uncover the layers of divine truth that speak directly to your battles today. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. From the first verse, David speaks to the reality of adversity. He doesn't skirt around it or offer false hope that trouble won't come. He acknowledges it. What makes this verse remarkable is that it immediately redirects our focus from the trouble itself to the God who answers. This sets the tone for the entire psalm, the assurance that we are not abandoned in our distress. The God who hears is the same God who intervenes. Even when it feels like we're shouting into the void, Psalm 20 reminds us that there is a God who listens, and his answers are never late. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. Here, the psalm invokes the God of Jacob, pulling us into the lineage of covenant faithfulness. Jacob's story was marked by struggle, heartbreak, and redemption. By calling upon this name, David connects the prayer to a history of promises fulfilled and God's unwavering loyalty to his people. This is not a generic plea for protection, it's a specific reminder that the same God who carried Jacob through his trials is the one who stands as a shield to protect us now. This verse builds a bridge between the God of ancient struggles and the God who continues to stand steadfast in our battles today. May he send you help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. The imagery here is powerful. The sanctuary was the dwelling place of God, a sacred symbol of his presence. Zion represents his eternal kingdom, the place where his reign is unshakable. Together, these references paint a picture of divine intervention that doesn't come from earthly sources but from heaven itself. It's not human wisdom or temporary solutions that sustain you, it's the eternal support of the Almighty. When you're facing a battle that feels beyond your capacity, this verse reminds you that your help doesn't depend on resources you can see. It comes from the King whose authority cannot be overthrown. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. This verse reflects the principle of covenant faithfulness. In David's time, offerings and sacrifices were ways of expressing devotion and trust in God. Today, it's not about physical sacrifices. Rather, it's about the posture of your heart. Have you poured out your time, energy, prayers, and faith, only to wonder if God notices? This verse is a reassurance that he does. He doesn't overlook your acts of obedience, no matter how small they seem. Every tear, every whispered prayer, every act of faithfulness, even when it feels like nothing is changing, matters deeply to God. Your efforts are seen, and his favor is not withheld. May he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans. At first glance, this verse could be misinterpreted as an open invitation for wish fulfillment, but it's far deeper than that. When your heart is aligned with God's will, your desires begin to mirror his. This verse isn't about superficial success. It's about the profound joy of seeing God's plans unfold in your life. It's an intimate promise that as you step into alignment with his purpose, he goes before you, orchestrating outcomes that not only fulfill your needs, but glorify him in the process. We will shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God, set up our banners. This line is electric with celebration. It's the transition from hope to victory. Notice the confidence. Not we might shout, but we will shout. It reflects the assurance of deliverance even before the battle begins. The banner symbols of identity and allegiance are raised not after the struggle has ended, but in the midst of it. This is an act of faith, declaring that the victory belongs to God even when the outcome is still unseen. The challenge for us here is to do the same, to celebrate God's faithfulness while we're still in the fight. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. If the psalm could be summed up in one verse, it might be this one. In ancient warfare, chariots and horses were the ultimate symbols of military might. To possess them was to project unbeatable strength, and yet David rejects these symbols entirely. This verse draws a sharp boundary between worldly reliance and spiritual trust. In today's context, our chariots and horses might be our finances, our skill sets, or even our connections. These are not inherently bad, but they become a problem when they replace God as the source of our confidence. This verse calls us to abandon our dependence on temporary things and anchor ourselves in something unshakable, the power of God's name. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright. This is the promise fulfilled. Those who place their trust in flawed earthly systems inevitably fall, but those who stand firm in faith find themselves rising from the ashes of defeat. This isn't about avoiding hardship. It's about emerging stronger because of where you placed your trust. Faith doesn't shield you from battles, but it ensures that the battles don't break you. Even when the world expects you to fall, God's strength lifts you higher. O Lord, save the King. May he answer us when we call. The psalm closes with a communal plea, bringing everyone into the fold. It's not just about individual struggles, but about the strength we find together when we call on God. This final verse is a reminder that our fights are not faced in isolation. They're part of a greater story, one where God's intervention is certain and his victory is inevitable. Psalm 20 isn't just a poetic prayer or a song of hope. It's a roadmap for the weary and the defeated, showing us how to shift our trust, realign our perspective, and step into battles with faith in the God who always answers. Linking Psalm 22 modern personal battles. Psalm the 20th of May have originated in the context of ancient warfare, but its message never aged. In fact, its wisdom grows even more relevant in the complexities of modern life. While we may not face physical armies, we are surrounded by battles that are just as intimidating, just as exhausting, and just as deeply personal. These battles are fought in our minds, our relationships, our careers, and even in our deepest spiritual struggles. The beauty of Psalm 20 is in how its truths transcend time, offering not just a promise of help, but a practical lens to reframe the ongoing challenges you're facing today. Every verse of Psalm 20 can be tied directly to the struggles we deal with daily. When David writes, "May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble," he's speaking into the very moments we often try to tackle alone. Whether you're grappling with financial strain, a medical diagnosis, or crippling anxiety, what David is showing us here is that our first instinct should never be reliance. How often do we exhaust every human resource, time, energy, money only, to remember prayer as an afterthought? What Psalm 20 teaches is to turn first to the one who knows every angle of your struggle. God is not your backup plan. He is your starting point. Think about how easily we trust in tools of our own making. For King David, it was chariots and horses. For us, it's anything we rely on to feel in control. We place faith in our bank accounts, our job titles, our physical health, or even the illusion of certainty that comes from long-term planning. But suddenly, a layoff, a diagnosis, or a failed project shatters that foundation. The pandemic alone taught us how fragile our securities are. Our chariots and horses fall apart when the world shifts. This is why the refrain, "We trust in the name of the Lord," carries such weight for those of us trying to navigate these modern storms. What does it mean to trust in God's name? It's not just faith in his existence. but in His authority, His power to act, and His promises to sustain us. Consider the pressure you feel during a personal failure. Maybe it's the daily grind of a job where no one sees your worth. Or perhaps it's the disappointment of trying to hold your family together, only to be met with distance or rejection. The emotional strain of these losing battles can wear down your sense of identity. You start believing that your value is tied to what you can earn, achieve, or prove to others. This is where Psalm 20 confronts the distorted narratives we tell ourselves. When David calls upon God to send help from His sanctuary and grant favor from Zion, he is reminding us of whose approval truly matters. You are not defined by the applause or rejection of the world. Your significance comes from being known, loved, and valued by the King who reigns on high. But Psalm 20 doesn't stop at comfort, it invites us to action. Trust is not passive. Sometimes, reflecting on this psalm challenges the way we approach our battles altogether. It forces you to ask hard questions. Are you fighting this battle in your strength or God's? Are you rushing toward quick fixes for your problems? Or are you willing to wait on His perfect timing? When David writes, "May He grant your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans," he isn't promising God will rubber stamp your to-do list. Instead, He's calling you to realign your desires with God's heart. This realignment shifts the burden from your shoulders to His. The deep emotional exhaustion of constantly striving can finally give way to a peace that says, "God, I cannot do this alone, and I was never meant to." Psalm 20 redefines what victory looks like in modern life. We often measure success by winning arguments, achieving benchmarks, or outperforming others. But the psalm reframes this entirely. Success isn't defined by what you've done, but by where you placed your trust while doing it. Victory isn't always about overcoming obstacles. Sometimes it's about enduring them with faith intact. The weight you've been carrying, the one that feels so heavy you can barely take the next step, that's the place where you're invited to fully surrender to God and watch Him step in. One of David's most powerful declarations in the psalm is his confidence. Even before the outcome is evident, "We will shout for joy over your salvation." He's not waiting for victory before giving God praise. So ask yourself this: are you willing to celebrate God's faithfulness while you're still in the battle? This is where faith becomes more than an idea, it becomes lived trust. You don't wait until the storm has passed to lift your eyes heavenward. You praise Him in advance, knowing He has already gone ahead of you, preparing the way to the breakthrough you haven't yet seen. Linking Psalm 22 modern struggles also means understanding that we don't fight alone. The verse, "May He answer us when we call," carries the collective voice of believers. It's a reminder of the power of community. Not just physical community, but spiritual support through shared faith. When we intercede for one another, lifting each other up in prayer, we affirm the truth that God moves, not just individually, but within His people as a whole. The psalm binds past and present believers together, encouraging us to approach life's most daunting challenges with the same bold trust declared thousands of years ago. Psalm 20 speaks as loudly to us today as it did in David's time. Its call to shift focus from self to God is as relevant in the face of insomnia and burnout as it was for soldiers preparing for war. This ancient prayer lives on, preparing us, equipping us, and reminding us that every battle, no matter how impossible it feels, has already been won by the God in whom we place our faith. Spiritual practices to activate the promises in Psalm 20. Psalm 20 is more than an inspiring chapter in Scripture. It's a blueprint for overcoming personal battles with faith and conviction. However, its promises remain dormant if not activated through intentional spiritual practices. The The psalm invites you to engage with it, to let its words move beyond intellectual understanding and take root in your daily walk with God. The battles you are fighting won't change until the truth of this psalm finds expression in how you approach each day, each challenge, and each moment of doubt. Here's how you can make the promises of Psalm 20 a living, breathing part of your life. The first and most foundational practice is prayer. Psalm 20 itself is a prayer, and its structure offers a model for your own conversations with God. Begin each day by bringing your troubles directly to Him. Too often, we save prayer for moments of desperation, treating it like a last resort. But Psalm 20 reminds us that seeking God should be the starting point, not the fallback plan. Pray specifically and boldly. Don't approach God with vague hopes. Instead, present your struggle clearly and ask for His divine help in the day of trouble, just as David prays. Name your battle, whether it's fear of failure, a strained relationship, or a personal loss, and trust Him to answer. Making this a daily practice keeps you grounded in the assurance that you are not fighting alone. Beyond prayer, meditation is a powerful way to let Psalm 20 transform your perspective. Modern life is filled with noise, distractions, and the constant pull of urgency. Meditation silences those voices and allows you to dwell on God's promises without interruption. Take a single verse, such as some trust in chariots and some in horses. But we trust in the name of the Lord our God, and spend time reflecting on its meaning. What are the chariots you've been relying on? How can you shift your faith toward God instead of placing it in things that cannot sustain you? As you meditate on these words, let them renew your mindset. Envision yourself laying down your burdens before Him, surrendering them fully in exchange for His strength. Another way to internalize the Psalm's promises is through worship. The phrase, "We will shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God set up our banners," reflects a heart of praise even before the battle is won. Worship is a declaration of trust. It's saying to God, "I believe you are working, even if I can't see it right now." Whether it's through song, thanksgiving, or reflective silence, worship redirects your thoughts away from your struggle and toward God's sovereignty. Make time for this regularly, especially in moments when doubt starts creeping in. Incorporating gratitude into your spiritual practices is another way to activate the lessons of Psalm 20. Gratitude serves as a safeguard against despair. The moment you start thanking God for what He has done, it becomes harder to dwell on anxiety or frustration. Start small. Each morning or evening, think of 3 specific blessings you've experienced and thank God for them. They could be as simple as the health you have today, or as profound as the relationships that sustain you. When you focus on His goodness, you build a foundation of trust that carries you through moments of uncertainty. A practical step that many overlook when engaging with Scripture is writing down the promises you find in it. With Psalm 20, keep a journal or even sticky notes for verses that resonate deeply with you. Place them where you'll encounter them often: your bathroom mirror, your workspace, or even as a daily alarm on your phone. These visible reminders are like anchors, pulling your heart back toward faith whenever it drifts into fear or discouragement. Marking these promises physically reinforces their presence in your life spiritually. Aligning your lifestyle with the truths found in Psalm 20 also involves a surrender of control. This one can feel the hardest because it involves releasing the very things you want to micromanage, the areas where you think you need to maintain a firm grip. Take some time to evaluate what parts of your life feel the most overwhelming. Where are you striving so hard that it's draining your peace? Whether it's career pressure, about personal perfectionism or self-made deadlines, write those things down. Now, pray over each one and surrender them intentionally to God. Revisit this practice. Often surrender isn't a one-time action, but a continual choice that invites God into every corner of your life. Fellowship with others is another essential practice that helps activate the promises of this psalm. Share your burdens with trusted believers, letting them pray for you and remind you of the truth found in God's word. When David refers to we in this psalm, it reflects a collective faith, not an isolated one. Community reinforces God's promises because it surrounds you with people who can speak life when your own strength feels depleted. Whether it's through a small group, a prayer meeting, or even one-on-one conversations, let others carry some of your burdens with you. Faith grows in the soil of shared struggles and victories. Lastly, Psalm 20 calls for a spirit of boldness. Trusting in God's promises requires stepping out in faith even when circumstances haven't changed yet. Maybe that means taking a leap of faith in an area you've been holding back, speaking words of encouragement to others while still seeking your own breakthrough, or simply choosing to keep going when giving up feels easier. Boldness doesn't mean ignoring fear or doubt. It means acting in spite of them, with confidence that God has already gone before you. Activating the Psalm's promises isn't about perfection. It's about consistency, about daily choosing to look up instead of inward. The words of Psalm 20, when practiced and lived out, begin to shift your perspective until faith becomes the lens through which you view every battle. Your trust in God deepens, and suddenly, those obstacles that once felt insurmountable become opportunities to see His power at work in you and through you. The neuroscience of faith and prayer. Faith and prayer are often understood as purely spiritual practices, deeply rooted in belief and trust in God. But they are not only matters of the heart and soul, they also profoundly impact the brain. Modern neuroscience has revealed that engaging in intentional prayer and deep faith-based reflection rewires the mind, influencing how we respond to stress, make decisions, and endure hardships. Psalm 20, as both a prayer and a declaration of trust, is the perfect guide to explore this intersection between spiritual practice and scientific insight, showing how faith isn't just transformative for the soul, but for the mind and body as well. The human brain is designed to respond to what it focuses on. When we dwell on fear, uncertainty, or worst-case scenarios, the brain signals the body to prepare for danger. This response activates the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and fight-or-flight instincts. While this reaction is helpful in immediate threats, like escaping physical danger, in modern life it's often triggered by emotional or psychological stress, things like financial instability, job pressure, or even personal disappointment. Over time, this constant activation of the amygdala can lead to chronic anxiety, imbalance, and an inability to think clearly under pressure. What does this have to do with faith and prayer? A great deal. Research shows that intentional practices like prayer work to calm the amygdala and recenter the brain's focus. When you engage in prayer, particularly prayers like Psalm 20 that center on trusting God and finding security in Him, the activity shifts away from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where rational thought, decision-making, and emotional regulation occur. In essence, prayer silences the alarm bells of fear and strengthens the brain's ability to process life with clarity and calmness. Psalm 20 underscores this principle by constantly shifting focus away from fear and onto God's power and presence. The phrase, "May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble," creates a mental anchor. When you declare that promise in prayer, your brain begins to let go of fear and replace it with trust. The act of repeating these words reinforces neural pathways that associate God with protection and peace, essentially training your brain to respond to stress with faith instead of panic. Science confirms this. When people engage in intentional prayer, neuroimaging studies showed decreased activity in fear-related brain regions and increased activity in places tied to empathy, reflection, and resilience. Another example from Psalm 20 is the line, "May He send you help from the sanctuary." When you meditate on God as the source of help, not yourself, not others, not circumstances, your brain begins to perceive challenges from a different angle. This shift realigns your perspective and reminds you that you're not alone, which reduces cortisol, the body's stress hormone. High levels of cortisol over time create wear and tear on the body, leading to fatigue, poor sleep, and even long-term health problems. But prayer helps lower these levels, allowing your body to recover and heal, even during tough battles. One of the most fascinating aspects of prayer is its ability to engage the brain in gratitude, which has profound neurological effects. Psalm 20 is rich in language that creates an attitude of gratitude and praise, such as, "We will shout for joy over your salvation. We trust in the name of the Lord our God." When you shout for joy over what God has done, or even for what He will do, you activate parts of the brain linked to happiness and reward. Gratitude releases dopamine, a feel-good neurotransmitter that enhances your mood and strengthens motivation. In turn, this not only helps you feel better emotionally, but equips you to keep going through life's hardest trials. Moreover, studies reveal that prayer strengthens neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and form new connections. This means that persistent acts of faith-based prayer, like meditating on Psalm 20, can create lasting transformations in how your brain functions. Neuroplasticity is what allows someone to break free from thinking patterns of fear, doubt, and self-reliance. By consistently focusing your mind on declaring trust in God and relying on His strength, you're rewiring your brain to adopt healthier mental habits. Over time, faith becomes your default response, not despair. Faith and prayer also invite your brain into stillness, a state that is increasingly rare in modern life. Psalm 20's confidence, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God," works as a mantra, pulling your mind away from distractions and centering it on one truth. God alone is your source of strength. By repeatedly meditating on this promise, you help suppress the constant chatter of doubts and worries that flood your mind throughout the day. Neuroscience tells us that this stillness activates the brain's parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest, repair, and emotional balance. When your mind rests in faith, your body follows, releasing tension and allowing room for restoration to take place. Lastly, prayer activates hope, and hope changes everything. Psalm 20's closing verse encapsulates this perfectly. "May He answer us when we call." That simple plea embodies anticipation and expectation that God will act. Hope is not just a spiritual concept, it's a biological one. Research shows that hope stimulates the release of endorphins, chemicals that reduce pain and produce a sense of well-being. This is why people with hope often have higher endurance in difficult situations. When you hold on to the promises of God through Psalm 20, it doesn't just encourage your heart, it empowers your brain to persevere. Psalm 20 doesn't just prepare your spirit for battle, it equips your mind for resilience and peace. The combination of faith, gratitude, and surrender at the core of this psalm creates a transformative effect, turning moments of fear into opportunities to grow stronger in your walk with God. Neuroscience only confirms what Scripture has taught all along. When we place our trust in Him, both our mind and spirit begin to align with His power, allowing us to fight every battle with newfound clarity, calmness, and hope. Divine strength versus human strength. In the battles of life, we are constantly faced with a choice. Do we rely on our own strength, or do we lean into a divine power that surpasses human understanding? This question is not abstract. It confronts us every time we feel the pressure to solve, fix, or overcome something on our own. And yet, as Psalm 20 reminds us, there is a fundamental limit to what human strength can accomplish. The psalm draws this distinction with these powerful words: "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." In David's time, chariots and horses were symbols of power and security, the ultimate tools in warfare. Today, they represent the things we rely on in moments of struggle, things we believe will bring us victory. Human strength is often tied to what we can see and control. It's in the confidence we place in our skills, resources, or plans. It's in the belief that if we just work a little harder, push a little longer, or try a little more, things will eventually fall into place. And to an extent, there's value in effort and preparation. But the problem isn't effort, it's misplaced trust. When we begin to anchor our hope in ourselves, in temporary means, or in fleeting circumstances, that's where our strength will eventually run dry. You've likely seen this before in your own life. Have you ever poured all your energy into solving a problem only to feel burned out, bitter, or even more defeated when your efforts didn't yield results? That's the limit of human strength. It is finite, conditional, and ultimately fails when the weight grows too heavy. Divine strength, on the other hand, operates on an entirely different principle: surrender. It's rooted in the acknowledgement that we were never meant to fight life's battles alone. The psalm confronts our natural inclination to rely on the tangible things we think will guarantee victory, and redirects our trust toward the unseen but unshakable power of God. Trusting in divine strength doesn't mean passivity. It means recognizing that real power begins where human effort ends. It's leaning into the one who sees every angle, knows every outcome, and has resources we could never comprehend. The contrast between divine and human strength becomes clearest in the moments when life falls apart. When the diagnosis comes, when the business fails, when the relationship crumbles, it quickly becomes obvious how limited our own strength truly is. Human effort, no matter how vigorous, can only carry you so far before the burden becomes unbearable. And it's often in these breaking points that we finally understand the invitation of Psalm 20. Stop trusting in your chariots. They were never meant to bear the full weight of your battles. David knew this truth, not just in theory, but in experience. Throughout his life, he faced battles that were impossible to win on his own. From his youth standing before the giant Goliath, armed with nothing but a sling, to political upheavals and betrayals by his closest allies, David learned firsthand that human strength was never enough. Time and again, it was God's intervention that led to victory, and Psalm 20 is a testament to that faith. The words "we trust in the name of the Lord" transcend mere optimism. They are a deliberate choice to declare that even when circumstances look dire, there is a power greater than what the world can offer. But what does trusting in divine strength look like in practice? It begins with a shift in perspective. When a problem feels overwhelming, the first instinct is usually to focus on what we can do about it, how to fix it, who to call, what steps to take next. While action has its place, Psalm 20 invites us to shift our first response from "what can I do?" to what will God do. This act of trust changes everything. It doesn't necessarily remove the problem, but it removes the crushing weight of trying to solve it alone. Divine strength also reshapes the way we view failure. While human strength measures success by immediate results, divine strength looks at the bigger picture. What looks like a loss to us may very well be part of God's plan to shape, refine, or redirect us. When David faced his struggles, he didn't always see immediate deliverance. He had to endure hardship, wait on God's timing, and trust that even the waiting had purpose. Leaning on divine strength means trusting that setbacks are not the end of the story, but a chapter in a greater narrative. Psalm 20's imagery pushes us to reflect on where our strength is anchored. Some trust in chariots and some in horses. What are the chariots and horses you've turned to recently? Maybe it's your bank account, your health, or the approval of others. Maybe it's the achievements you've worked so hard for, hoping they'd bring lasting peace. The psalm reminds us that these things, while valuable, are not ultimate. They collapse under pressure. Only God's strength is firm enough to sustain us. The invitation isn't to reject effort, but to align effort with trust. You still work, but you work knowing the outcome is ultimately in God's hands. That's where peace comes from, not from controlling the storm, but from trusting the one who commands it. Divine strength doesn't just sustain us, it empowers us. While human strength is about doing and striving, divine strength transforms us from the inside out. It doesn't just help us survive battles, it equips us to face them with confidence. That kind of strength flows not from what we can muster, but from what we receive when we surrender. It's the strength to keep going when everything inside you says to stop. It's the resilience to face rejection, uncertainty, and trials with the assurance that God is fighting for you. Psalm 20 is a call to shift your reliance, not away from effort, but away from misplaced trust. Trust in human strength leads to exhaustion, but trust in God leads to perseverance. It's a reminder that when you stop striving to do everything in your strength, you open the door for God's unlimited power to take over. And it's within that surrender that you'll find the strength to stand firm, rise above defeat, and walk boldly through whatever battle lies ahead. Inspiring real-life testimonies. In moments of struggle, one of the most powerful sources of encouragement is the story of someone else who faced overwhelming odds and experienced God's faithfulness. Psalm 20 is alive with the assurance that trust in God leads to victory, not always the kind we expect, but the kind that transforms us from within. These testimonies, whether from history or modern experience, are living examples of what happens when people take these truths to heart and allow God's strength to carry them through. Consider the life of Corrie ten Boom, a woman whose story has become a beacon of hope for countless believers. During World War II, Corrie and her family risked everything to hide Jews from the Nazis in their home in the Netherlands. When their actions were discovered, Corrie and her sister Betsy were sent to a concentration camp, a place defined by suffering, cruelty, and despair. It would have been easy to put her trust in human strength, her own resourcefulness, or the faint hope of rescue. But Corrie understood something deeper. The battle she was in could not be fought with human weapons. Betsy, whose faith remained unshakable despite their circumstances, often reminded Corrie of this truth, repeating what Psalm 20 declares: "Victory comes not from the strength of man, but from the name of the Lord." Even while enduring the horrors of the camp, the sisters held secret Bible studies, sharing the hope of God's promises with other prisoners. In that dark, despair-filled place, they raised a banner of trust in God. Betsy eventually died in the camp, a devastating loss for Corrie, but not before she encouraged her sister to forgive their captors and continue proclaiming God's faithfulness. After the war, Corrie spent the rest of her life sharing her story and bringing the message of forgiveness and reliance on God to the world. Her victory wasn't found in her escape from hardship, but in the way her faith transformed the suffering into a testimony of God's power. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, she would later write, echoing Psalm 20, "But we trust in the name of the Lord our God." Another story comes from a man named Nick Vujicic, born without arms or legs due to a rare medical condition. For much of his early life, Nick wrestled with deep questions of worth, faith, and purpose. How could someone like him possibly live a meaningful life? The chariots and horses he lacked were his physical abilities, which the world views as essential to success. Yet, Nick chose to trust in something far greater. After years of battling depression and self-doubt, he gave his life fully to God and began to see his challenges as opportunities for God's power to be displayed. Over time, Nick became a globally renowned speaker, sharing his faith and inspiring millions to find hope in God. He didn't rely on what the world considered strength, but on God's ability to use his weakness for his glory. Nick's testimony perfectly reflects the heart of Psalm 20, a reminder that true power doesn't come from the physical, visible resources at our disposal. Instead, it's found in the surrender that allows God to work through our limitations. His life proves that the battles we face, whether emotional, physical, or spiritual, are not barriers to victory, but platforms for God to show his faithfulness. Closer to home, there are stories that echo this same truth in quieter but no less profound ways. Imagine the single mother who, after years of financial struggle, kept her faith anchored in God as she raised her children. Day by day, she prayed Psalm 20 over her circumstances, asking for God's provision and protection. There were moments when all seemed lost, when bank accounts were empty and the pressure of providing seemed impossible. And yet, through unexpected kindness, an anonymous grocery delivery, a surprise job opportunity, a community that rallied around her in times of need, God showed her that her trust was not in vain. Her victory wasn't loud or headline-worthy, but it was no less miraculous. Every step reflected the faithfulness of a God who answers in the day of trouble. History and modern testimonies alike demonstrate that God's promises in Psalm 20 are not abstract. They are alive, unfolding in the lives of those who dare to place their trust in Him. The consistent thread in these stories is not an absence of struggle, but the triumph found in surrender. These individuals didn't win their battles because they relied on human ingenuity or strength. They overcame because they trusted in something far greater. They showed that when we release our grip on the things we believe will save us, God steps in and delivers far more than we imagined. Perhaps most inspiring are the personal testimonies that happen quietly every day. The couple on the brink of divorce who, instead of giving up, chose to bring their marriage before God, praying Psalm 20's words of deliverance over their relationship. The student battling crippling anxiety, who shifted their trust from self-perfection to God's peace, finding the strength to take one more step each day. The elderly widow grieving the loss of her spouse, who uses Psalm 20 as a source of comfort and a reminder that God is still her protector and provider. These stories resonate because they are not distant ideals, they are attainable. The same God who answered Corrie ten Boom, Nick Vujicic, and countless others is the same God who answers you. Psalm 20 is not a relic of history or an abstract set of promises. It's an invitation to each of us, in whatever battle we face, to stop leaning on the things of this world and choose instead to trust in the name of the Lord. your story too can become a testimony. It doesn't require perfection or a guarantee of quick results. It simply requires surrender, the willingness to say, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but I trust in the name of the Lord." When you do, you'll discover that no matter how fierce your battle, you are never fighting alone. Your breakthrough starts now. Life is a battlefield, and no one escapes it without scars. Whether you're carrying the weight of past disappointments, wrestling with present struggles, or dreading an uncertain future, the battles you face can feel all-consuming. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, defeated, and utterly alone. But if there's one profound truth that Psalm 20 reveals, it's that your battles are not yours to fight alone. Your breakthrough is not just a distant hope. It begins the moment you shift your trust from your own strength to the unlimited power of God. Psalm 20 is not just a prayer, it's a strategy. It's an invitation into a posture of faith and surrender that redefines what victory looks like. Victory isn't about never falling, it's about rising in the strength of the one who has already won. Take a moment to reflect on these words. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. What are the chariots and horses in your life? What have you been turning to for strength, security, and control? Have you been striving with all your might, only to find yourself even more exhausted, frustrated, or discouraged? The reality is, we often place our trust in things that can't sustain us. Whether it's our relationships, finances, careers, health, or even our own abilities, these can only carry us so far. And when they inevitably fall short, we're left feeling abandoned. But the God of Psalm 20 calls you to something deeper. He invites you to trade anxiety for trust, weariness for rest, and defeat for confidence, not in yourself, but in Him. If you've been seeking your breakthrough, ask yourself this: have you surrendered the battle to God? True surrender isn't giving up. It's letting go of the false belief that you're in control of the outcome. It's doing what you can while trusting God to do what only He can. Surrender means allowing the promises of Psalm 22 transform your perspective. It means declaring, even before the situation changes, that He is faithful, that He hears when you call, and that His victory is already in motion. Now is the time to activate the powerful truths of Psalm 20 in your life. Begin by praying daily, not as a shallow routine, but as a deliberate act of surrender. When you wake up each morning, start by handing your battles to God. Speak the words of the psalm out loud. May the Lord answer me in the day of trouble. May He send me help from His sanctuary. Let those words settle deep in your heart and guide your decisions throughout the day. Keep coming back to God's promises, especially when you feel fear creeping in. The choice to trust is made moment by moment, but don't stop there. Worship Him even in the middle of the storm. This is not merely an act of gratitude, it's a declaration of faith. Psalm 20 reminds us that we can shout for joy over salvation even before the battle has been won. What does this look like in your life? It means thanking God for what He will do, even when you can't see it yet. It means raising your banner, a symbolic act of declaring your allegiance to God, no matter what the world throws at you. Surround yourself with people who will stand in faith with you. Isolation weakens even the strongest hearts. Keep a community of people who remind you of God's goodness and promises, especially when doubt begins to cloud your view. Share your struggles with others, ask for their prayers, and be bold enough to let them walk this journey of faith with you. Your breakthrough doesn't happen when life finally becomes easy. It begins now, in the middle of the uncertainty, when you choose to trust even against the odds. The moment you take that step of surrender, you invite the God of heaven, your creator, redeemer, and defender to step into your situation. What feels impossible to you is nothing compared to his power. He is not a distant observer, passively watching you struggle. He is your refuge, your strength, and your deliverer. Psalm 20 closes with these words, "O Lord, save the King. May he answer us when we call." This is the assurance that you are not crying into silence. God hears, he acts, and no matter how long the battle may last, his faithfulness never wavers. When you pray in faith, when you surrender in trust, and when you declare victory in his name, you are no longer the one carrying the weight of the fight. The battle belongs to the Lord, and in him, victory is already won. You don't have to wait until tomorrow, next week, or next year to begin this journey of surrender. Your breakthrough starts now. Speak it aloud. Lord, I choose to trust you. I lay down my chariots and horses, and I declare that victory belongs to you. Let this prayer become the anthem of your heart. Let it guide your thoughts, your actions, and your faith. Let Psalm 20 be the foundation of the confidence that carries you through the storms of life. And as you take each step forward, no matter how small, remember this: the God who answered David, who held him firm through every battle, is the same God who holds you today. Your battle is his battle. Your breakthrough has already begun. Would you take the step of trusting him fully today? All it takes is surrender. All it takes is faith in the name that never fails. And that is where your breakthrough begins.